The Science of Self-Realization by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness books sometimes have doctrinal definitions for words, and it would be nice that if there was always a literal definition of the terms involved. The reports are very authentic, and it is good that they have some definitions here. But for example, Akrura, as an uncle of who they call Krishna, well, that's an important piece of information, but it also helps with some of these stories when we find out what these names mean, particularly when we're talking about what could be considered to be deity names. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada was born in Calcutta, India in 1896. He started his spiritual path formally in 1922 under Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami. And ten years later, he was initiated, and he started the process. In 1944, Back to Godhead was released for the first time, and that was a magazine that they started. In 1959, he became totally renounced, although in 1950 he kind of started, you could say, neglecting the married life, although in that culture they just kind of accept that. And if he was 54 years old, it probably wasn't as big of a deal. As much as the Bhagavad Gita as it is better known, his translation of the Srimad Bhagavatam, or the Bhagavata Purana, which was completed in print by his disciples, because the last two cantos weren't completely organized, but the translation was done. You can listen to his speeches that comprised what would become the last two cantos in print. I mean, the cantos were known, but you know what I mean. He really set himself apart as a scholar for that, because you have the text. Anybody can put forward the text practically, right? Transliteration, translation, purport, and a purport that fits in with the disciplic succession that he was a part of. So he, and it's obvious that he didn't entirely just copy, but he did keep within his school of thought, which was, and the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, July 1966, was its formal incorporation, and there's hundreds of temples and schools and stuff now. There was only around 100 at that time when he died in 1977, November 14th. And his legacy, of course, lives on in the book trust founded in 1972. And so one of the things that I'm going to continue to do on this channel is I'm going to, release my comments and try to work out, that's why it's not so smooth. I'm working it out as I go along. my understanding and practice of all this material that has been put out and released regarding what he taught. And India is known as Bharata Varsha, and that includes Bangladesh and Pakistan, by the way, within those definitions. All over the world, country lines have been drawn that really don't line up with things anciently as people think. So you have people in overlapping countries fighting for their so-called ancestral lands when really a bunch of countries would have been joined back in the day, or, you know, there was this overarching culture and it was just local leaders. I would like to know what Chanura means, because it's, you know, he was a famous wrestler, but maybe the phrase has something to do with wrestling, maybe it has something to do with something else with his life. The Chaitya Guru is the inner spiritual guide that enlightens. But that doesn't mean we're pointing at everybody and saying, God, God, you know, because some people think that, oh, it's not a big deal, God's just, it's like, it's not about this physical attachment to a place. When people pick a prayer direction or have a temple or whatever, it's not that they're denying the omnipotence of God. That's not what it's about, but people kind of don't get that right. There is the practice of presencing, and Goloka is another term for Vaikuntha, the highest spiritual planet. Well, because if deity is the controller of the cows, and we're like cows, and therefore, you know, those who've accepted that to be herded up into the highest heaven. Okay, that makes sense that it's called like that. The Hari Vamsa is another portion that's connected to the Mahabharata. And Indra, oh, there's something about that. Oh, I forget what Indra means. People, for example, will think that I'm a Janani, and yes, that's where a lot of my skill in life is the mental development. And it's understandable for me. It's not about you know, I'm trying to benefit other people by it. I'm trying to, you know, whatever. But it's, you know, and of course the name that people would say Ketsa, right? Well, it's the sense controller. The third listing, when you have, or fourth, or depending on the series, but the last thing when we give out the numbers for where to find things in the scriptures is the particular mantra number. I think we just call them mantras, but in English we would call them verses. So canto, chapter, verse would be a usual breakdown. The Bhagavad Gita and some other ones you only have two, or you just have one. And so the last one is always what you'd call the verse, the mantra number. And just like other things in America, we in particular, where things were named new, Vrindavana, you know, we look at these things going on spiritually in the past or current, and we try to bring out a new thing. Maybe we aren't going to have the top place of pilgrimage or that sort of thing. Maybe that's not what we're looking for, but we're trying to establish communities on those principles, and that's why we might have a renaming of that sort. And Pandavas are certainly, you know, the 5 warrior brothers, but there's meaning to that too. And prema isn't a unrequited love, but it's a love that operates like unrequited love, but without the tragedy of, you know, Rajas, of course, is one of the modes, and it's the passionate mode. If you see the three-horse self, it's the red one, or, you know, there's that sort of stuff going on. We have Sabda Brahma is another name for the Vedas. There's some sort of animal and property, or a tree just fell. I'll find out. Or maybe I don't want to find out, because sometimes what shows up here is not. Anyways, that's a distraction. And don't worry if you're a Sudra. If you're a hand laborer, as Jesus would have been called more literally rather than a carpenter, it doesn't mean you can't be of the highest spiritual station as far as an incarnated being, or that this is not the best place for you. Tamas is, of course, another one of the modes. It's the dark mode. People say ignorance, but it's more than that. It's the dark mode. And the Upanishads, or the sit-down teachings, we don't have the exact translation with that here. And again, I think that a text like this, it would be nice to have that. The Varna Sankara is people of a mixed class, and when society is failing, then people just freely mix. But spiritually, you should try to have a supporting platform. And certainly as far as what is good for your material roles, it's not always just to mix either. You know, there's a lot of talk in particular that if you're white, people want you to mix, and it's like, again, you shouldn't just get with somebody just because, oh, they're a little bit diverse, right? It's you know, it's like, okay, there may be nothing wrong with the mixing, but when you make the point of the mixing, yeah, that's a fallen society. When the point is to mix, not social interaction. You go to a place of worship and you're good to the people there, you know, whatever. But it's you know, and of course the yuga is the age that we're in, and I'm some of these things are difficult to pronounce, but one of the things is that we do our best. So as long as you're trying to do your best, you're not messing up on purpose, you're trying to learn, don't worry about it. Just go forward. We are turning to the all attractive. Whatever language, whatever term, that's it. The ultimate deity. And we're supposed to try to, for what we believe, what we do, find some real authority. Not authoritarian, you know, do we wear hats? It's like, well, maybe if you want to find out if there's a principle about clothing or something, but, you know, I've had students ask me, do you wear, you know, is it okay if we wear hats? That sort of stuff. It's like, it's whatever. But we don't just chant the same thing. We're trying to learn too. We're trying to think about things. And every day, we do the same. We do more, we try to do better, we're just trying to work with that. And in the 1500s, there was revival about just making a simple set of sounds. Realize yourself, realize the cosmos, form that natural peace between it. As part of a relationship to deity, a real relationship, not just you say Jesus is my best friend, or whatever else people say, right? Or some people say Satan, or you know, it's not just you're claiming it. Although claiming a response to what you believe has happened or is occurring, or some principle, that's certainly an important thing. And there's certain basic rules, you know, aside from, you know, and there are opportunities to fulfill these rules. No unlawful killing. You don't take part in it with your politics or anything else. Sure, you may have to vote for the best people, but make that part one of your conditions, you know. If you think there might be peace, then okay. And nothing with the cheating mentality. No sexual sin, whatever that may mean to you. Don't just look what the laws are in your area, because what if you go to the next county over and they have different laws? There are some different laws with some of that stuff, right? Or there may be some technicality. Prostitution doesn't become right if you take a picture or something. As much as the law in my country is like that, and no drug use. People say, oh, it's just no, all drug use. No drug use except you can excuse those who need to take a pill so that they can eat. They need to take a painkiller so they can eat, or whatever the case is, or so that they can heal, or okay, that's different. But if it's just so you feel better, or because you like to drink coffee or whatever, no. And there are some particulars, right? But they're universals. Everybody can take some part in a spiritual science. Everybody can deny the idea that they're the body and that's it, right? Everybody can refer to deity as the greatest, the more eternal, the more, etc., even more than the other relatively acausal entities that you refer to, that there's an ultimate acausal. Everybody can go that far. Their articulation and understanding and learning in that respect, okay. And there's a unity of scriptures. What was actually revealed, what was actually inspired in its pure form, transmitted and explained correctly, or as far as it is, it's for all times. Now, that being said, there are smaller and more contemporary scriptures for the international age. Now, whether you say that is the Bhagavad Gita, certainly the Jesus of the Bible did not say that he was the end one, that there was going to be another one when it was taken away from the Israelites and given to the Ishmaelites, and other sorts of things. Or maybe we're waiting for the some end times final reformer or something like that. Whatever your definition of that, there's more contemporary guidance, or there will be, right? That's one of the ideas. Or will be pointed to something by some contemporary figure. And all that we do, even if it's chewing on some grass because you're out of food, but honestly, this is much better food than this. I've seen people just wander up and it's like, hey, if it's the food growing on our property, don't, you might ask before you start eating it. Because I will gather up piles of this stuff every day after day after day, after the season for the grapes is over with. But anyways, all we do can be offered to deity. That doesn't mean we have to chant while sitting on the toilet, but certainly, our response to the principles of going in there and out of there and stuff, all we do, whatever it is, can be dedicated to divinity. It's not about ourselves, but when we take that focus off against merely ourselves, that we are the vehicle, then this devotional service has something right. Then we don't have to worry about ourself, or our love for any other particular creation. And of course, another thing that we look at is there are means. Now, one of the things, I'm looking through the appended portion. Bhagavad Gita, 1855. Bhaktya mama bijanate. Devotional service is the only way to know deity. Remember, the Bhagavad Gita is supposed to be quoted by God. It's the sent one, whether you believe that who sent the sent one, right? But regards to the interpretation, just like when the Bible has Jesus say, if you love me, keep my commandments. If you say that's a quote of him, without it being the doctrine of the one who sent him, like other parts in the Bible have him say, or whether you accept that as it is and say it still amounts to the same thing. These are supposed to be quotes. And if you understand that in either way, it does something different than you're usually going to find in Scripture. But anyways, so how do we become devoted? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now, there is a recommendation to go through 108 beads 16 times a day. Some people double it, some whatever, but 16 times a day. It can take a couple hours. But at the very least, I think pretty much everybody's capable of doing something like this. Now, it can seem tedious and all that sort of stuff, but, particularly when we've been programmed all our lives to try to dull our senses with music and everything else, but it's a continual offering. Now, some people will need beads to count this out. Some people won't. They'll be like, once I know that I've done stuff, I don't worry. I just, chant, right? But some people are going to keep track, and that's fine. A lot of people get all bent out of shape because people are keeping track. Some people want to use recordings, and I certainly would recommend the kirtan programs for that. Or just repeating along when you watch a video like this and somebody goes over it. There's certainly a lot of stuff that is free, but I would recommend having copies of the digital media and the physical media if you're going to go down this process. Now, you set up your altar with symbols that relate directly to deity, directly to your spiritual lineage, directly to the initial community, and from that initial community came the disciplic succession, the chains of narrations, that sort of stuff. So you want to think of things in that form. But to ultimate divinity, we want some nice things. It's going to be a nice place, whether it's something you pull out of a bag and set up and make your setup. Candles, little serving things. A lot of people have things in miniature. People may have a musical instrument. A lot of traditions don't use musical instruments, but incense. You may have a thing where the water evaporates. You may have some sense of holy water. Of course, everything becomes holy water, holy bread, etc., when it's used in that way. And so at home, you have this place. You may have collective places that you go to or other places that you go visit. People may know there are different places on this property that I've set as outdoor altars of one sort or another. And some people may let the scented things pile up, but keeping things fresh and maybe grinding the flowers and using them as incense for further offerings or something and putting that somewhere else to process. But when you bring in your fresh things, right, you want to keep it pleasant. You want to have your thing. So we offer our obeisances to the presencing of the divine controller, God of light, a spirit of nobility, the making mention that there are light beings and other such things. Whatever we're offering with devotion, right? And the private prayers that we offer should represent the whole of our spiritual life in one way or another. It may take a long time to go through some things as path workings and stuff, and sure, you can do that. And maybe off to the side, or maybe even part of your altar might be particular books. Of course, you want to protect them from the processes of incense and food and that sort of thing. But you know, it's a place of connection. It doesn't pray for you. It doesn't have power in itself, but it builds up this connection to the point where even if you die, people can feel, whoa, this is the place. And then they find out in the journal, oh, this was the place where grandfather went and did his private material. And if our work is lawful, and we know our work is acceptable, then, you know, it becomes part of that devotion. If you're good at writing, or if you do write, if you're artistic, or you're good at art, or even if you're not propagating things directly, the fact that you pay your alms, or take part in offerings, or use your money correctly, you know, you earn your money correctly, you use it correctly, you're trying to maintain yourself as a devotee, that is devotional work. And there's plenty of places around the world, in America, otherwise. I am not... There's supposed to be some communities nearer to me, and I don't want to necessarily say what states and stuff they're in, but I am not seeing places that I've heard talked about mentioned in the listing here. But it's good that they gave you, that they make a list of official centers and keep things organized to the point where you kind of know, hey, here's a place I can go, and here's practices that I'm familiar with, both the basic and others, who knows what ones that aren't as essential they're practicing, but here's places to go. And Scripture teaches us our nature, what to believe or what to do about our environment, and how to make it a relationship to deity. A perennial philosophy, even though some things at some times were certainly local rules. And it's important for us to understand what our devotion is going to do. It is important to understand the continuing conversation, and that there's a continual tradition to know of the history of. There's just so much out there that you can make things a lifestyle with. A better civilization. And one of the things, there's spiritual travel. So a lot of things that people talk about, you know, there is guidance. It's not just wandering in the dark.